July 21, 1918. Near Baccarat, France. German forces captured an American soldier from the 307th Infantry Regiment, 77th Division. The prisoner was carrying a weapon German intelligence had never examined before, a Winchester Model 1897 shotgun with a 20-inch barrel, a perforated steel heat shield, and a bayonet lug attached to the end. German officers studied the weapon carefully. They measured the barrel length, examined the pump action mechanism, tested the trigger. Then they fired it with captured American ammunition, 9 lead pellets per shell, each pellet approximately .33 caliber. At 10 meters, the shot pattern covered an area 1 meter wide. At 20 meters, nearly 2 meters. One trigger pull could hit multiple soldiers simultaneously. The implications were immediately clear to German military intelligence. This was not a rifle. It did not require precise aim at individual targets. Point it in, the general direction of the enemy, and pump the action. The spread of buckshot did the rest. In the close confines of trench warfare, where combat happened at ranges of 5 to 20 meters, this weapon fundamentally changed the tactical equation. For 3 years, both sides had fought with rifles, machine guns, grenades, and artillery. These were weapons designed for open warfare, adapted awkwardly to trenches. Rifles needed accurate shooting at individual targets. Machine guns required setup time and crew operation. Grenades had limited range, but this American shotgun was purpose-built for exactly the kind of fighting that dominated the Western Front. Close quarters, narrow trenches, sudden encounters around corners where soldiers faced each other at arm's length. The German General Staff recognized the threat immediately. They had invented poison gas, they had deployed flamethrowers, they had used sawtooth bayonets and heavy artillery. But this American weapon was different. It was not exotic or cruel. It was simply more effective than anything else at close range, and effectiveness was more dangerous than cruelty. The weapon was called a trench gun by American soldiers. Officially, it was designated a riot shotgun with bayonet adapter. The United States Army ordered approximately 25,000 shotguns for use in France. Most were Winchester Model 1897s. Another 3,500 were Remington Model 10s, all modified for military use with heat shields, bayonet lugs, and shortened barrels. Each gun held 6 shells. Each shell contained 9 pellets of double-aught buckshot. At close range, one trigger pull could hit 3 or 4 men simultaneously. The effective killing range was 30 meters. Inside a trench, where soldiers fought at distances of 5 to 15 meters, the shotgun was absolutely dominant. The concept was simple. Traditional rifles were designed for long-range accuracy. 1 bullet, 1 target, effective at hundreds of meters. But trench warfare had changed the equation. Most combat happened at close range. Trenches were narrow, twisting, full of obstacles. Soldiers came around corners face to face with enemies 5 meters away. In that environment, accuracy mattered less than volume of fire. A shotgun firing 9 pellets per trigger pull had 9 times the hit probability of a rifle firing 1 bullet. The math was undeniable. The United States Army had recognized this before entering the war. American military observers had watched British and French forces fight Germans for 3 years. They saw how trench warfare worked: close quarters, brutal hand-to-hand fighting, traditional infantry tactics failing. The British used clubs, the French used knives, the Germans used flamethrowers and grenades. Everyone was improvising, trying to find weapons that worked in trenches. The Americans looked at the problem differently. They had a weapon that Americans had used for hunting and law enforcement for decades: the pump-action shotgun. Fast-firing, devastating at close range, reliable, simple to operate. American police departments had used shotguns for riot control since the 1880s. American hunters used them for waterfowl and deer. The military just needed to adapt the design for combat use. The man who proposed adapting shotguns for military use was William Gorenway, Eager from Valdosta, Georgia. Eager was not a military officer. He was a civilian engineer with a degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Pennsylvania. In September 1917, he was working as general manager of a local lighting company, but Eager had been following the war closely. He understood the tactical problem American forces would face in France. Eager spent weeks preparing a comprehensive engineering report. The report analysed trench warfare conditions based on British and French experience. It outlined the limitations of existing weapons in OT, close quarters combat. It proposed modifying commercial shotguns for military use. Specifically, Eager recommended both pump-action and semi-automatic models. The pump-action Winchester Model 1897 and the semi-automatic Browning Auto 5 were both viable candidates. The modification requirements were straightforward. Shorten the barrel to 20 inches for maneuverability in trenches. Add a steel heat shield over the barrel so soldiers could grip it after firing multiple rounds. Attach a bayonet lug so the weapon could mount a standard M1917 bayonet. Include sling swivels for carrying. The result would be a weapon optimized specifically for trench assault and defense. Eager sent his report to the War Department in September 1917. 1 month later, Major General Henry McCain, the Army's Adjutant General, responded. General John Pershing, commander of the American Expeditionary Forces, had reviewed the proposal. Pershing approved it, enthusiastically. Pershing had served in the Philippines where American forces used shotguns against Moro fighters. He knew from personal experience that shotguns were effective in close combat. The War Department moved quickly. By November 1917, contracts were issued to Winchester and Remington. Winchester would produce a modified version of their Model 1897. Remington would produce a modified version of their Model 10. Both manufacturers had to work within tight constraints. The modifications had to be simple enough for rapid production. The weapons had to use existing commercial shotgun designs to minimize tooling costs, and everything had to be completed within months, not years. Slam firing was unique to the Winchester, Model 1897. Unlike modern pump shotguns, the Model 1897 lacked a trigger disconnector. This meant the gun would fire every time the action closed if the trigger was held down. A soldier could hold the trigger back and simply pump the action as fast as possible. Each pump resulted in one shot. Trained soldiers could empty the gun in 2 seconds. 54 buckshot pellets in 2 seconds. At ranges under 10 meters, this was devastating. The shotguns arrived in France in early 1918. The initial shipment included 5,000 guns. 4,000 were designated for guarding German prisoners of war. 1,000 were assigned to combat units for testing. The combat test units were spread across multiple divisions. Small numbers, 10 to 20 guns per regiment, issued to soldiers who would use them in offensive and defensive operations. The first significant use of shotguns in combat happened at Seicheprey on April 20, 1918. American soldiers from the 26th Infantry Division, the Yankee Division, fought German stormtroopers in one of the first major engagements involving American troops. The battle started at 0400 hours with German artillery bombardment. 3,000 German stormtroopers attacked American positions. The Americans, mostly men from Connecticut and New England, fought back with rifles, machine guns, grenades, and a small number of shotguns. The combat reports from Seicheprey were mixed. The battle was chaotic. Americans lost 81 killed, 424 wounded, 130 captured. 40 of the dead were from Connecticut. But they held the line. The Germans withdrew after 24 hours of fighting. In the confusion of battle, it was difficult to determine which weapons had been most effective. But soldiers who had used the shotguns reported something different. They said the shotgun changed how they fought. American soldiers who carried shotguns at Seicheprey described a weapon that responded instantly to threats in the trenches. When German stormtroopers rushed American positions through the morning fog, shotgun-armed defenders could fire at groups of 12. Attackers without needing precise aim. Point in the general direction. Pull the trigger. Pump the action. Fire again. The spread of buckshot covered enough area that hitting multiple targets was almost automatic at ranges under 20 meters. Traditional rifle doctrine required aimed fire at individual targets. Identify the threat. Acquire sight picture. Control breathing. Squeeze trigger. This took seconds. In trench combat, seconds meant death. The shotgun eliminated most of that process. See movement. Point weapon. Fire. The 9 pellets spreading from each shell created a pattern large enough that precise aim was unnecessary. This made inexperienced soldiers nearly as effective as veterans in close combat. The psychological effect was significant. Soldiers carrying shotguns reported feeling more confident in close quarters. They knew that if an enemy appeared suddenly around a corner or emerged from a dugout, they had a weapon that could respond faster and more effectively than a rifle. This confidence translated into more aggressive tactics. American units with shotguns cleared trenches faster and took fewer casualties doing it. The battle at Seicheprey was reported in American newspapers as a great victory. The press emphasized American courage and determination. Some reports mentioned the shotguns. One reporter called them trench sweepers. Another called them the terror of the trenches. The reports were exaggerated, dramatic, designed to boost morale back home, but they caught the attention of German military intelligence. German intelligence officers read American newspapers. They tracked American weapons and tactics. In late April 1918, intelligence reports began mentioning shotguns. The reports noted that Americans were using pump-action shotguns in trench combat. The reports described the weapons as short-barreled, capable of rapid fire, devastating at close range. German commanders took note. They wanted more information. The first, shotguns arrived in France in early 1918. The initial procurement included 5,000 weapons. 4,000 were designated for guarding German prisoners of war. 1,000 were assigned to combat units for field testing. These combat shotguns were distributed across multiple divisions in small numbers, typically 10 to 20 guns per regiment. The army wanted to see how they performed before committing to larger-scale deployment. The soldiers who received shotguns in these early trials had mixed reactions. Some immediately recognized the weapon's potential for trench warfare. Others were skeptical. Shotguns were hunting weapons. Civilians used them to shoot ducks. Professional soldiers used rifles. There was a cultural resistance to overcome. American military tradition emphasized marksmanship, accurate rifle fire at long range. The shotgun represented a different philosophy. Volume of fire over accuracy, saturation over precision. But combat experience quickly changed minds. Units that used shotguns in trench raids reported dramatic results. Clearing operations that previously took hours were completed in minutes. Casualties decreased. German counterattacks were stopped more effectively. The shotgun gave American infantry a tool that worked in the specific conditions they faced every day. German military lawyers examined the shotgun against the Hague Convention of 1907. Specifically, they looked at Article 23, subsection E, which prohibited weapons calculated to cause unnecessary suffering. The legal argument was that shotgun pellets caused wounds that were more severe than necessary to put a soldier out of action. Each pellet created a separate wound channel. A soldier hit by multiple pellets would have multiple wounds, increased bleeding, higher chance of infection, greater suffering. The German legal analysis was technically sophisticated, but strategically motivated. German military lawyers understood international law. They knew the Hague Convention language was subjective. The phrase calculated to cause unnecessary suffering required interpretation. What counted as unnecessary, compared to what baseline? The Germans argued that shotguns caused disproportionate suffering compared to rifles, but this argument was selective. Germany had introduced weapons far more cruel than shotguns. Poison gas caused soldiers to drown in their own fluids. Flamethrowers burned men alive. These weapons clearly caused suffering beyond what was necessary to remove soldiers from combat. Yet Germany defended their use as militarily necessary. The German protest was not primarily about humanitarian concerns. It was about tactical disadvantage. German intelligence had analyzed the shotgun's performance in combat. They calculated that American units equipped with shotguns could clear trenches at approximately 3 times the speed of units armed only with rifles. Casualty rates for attacking forces were reduced by an estimated 40 to 50% when shotguns were used in the assault wave. These were significant tactical advantages that German forces could not match with existing weapons. German general staff officers debated potential countermeasures. Could German forces develop their own combat shotguns? Technically, yes, but German military doctrine did not emphasize close-quarters weapons. German industry was focused on producing artillery, machine guns, and rifles. Diverting production capacity to shotguns would take months and would not address the immediate tactical problem. Could German forces modify tactics to counter American shotgun use? Partially, but the fundamental problem remained. In trenches at close range, the shotgun was simply superior to the rifle. On September 19, 1918, the German government issued a formal diplomatic protest. The protest was transmitted through Switzerland, which represented German interests in negotiations with the Cumbria, United States. The message was delivered to Friedrich Oderlin, the Swiss chargé d'affaires in Washington. Oderlin presented the protest to United States Secretary of State Robert Lansing. The German protest stated that the use of shotguns violated the laws of war. It cited Article 23, subsection E of the Hague Convention. It demanded that the United States stop using shotguns immediately. It included a threat. Any American soldier captured with a shotgun or shotgun ammunition would forfeit his life. This was a death sentence. The Germans were saying they would execute American prisoners of war if those prisoners were carrying shotguns. The threat was extraordinary. Executing prisoners of war was itself a violation of the Hague Convention. The Geneva Convention protected prisoners. Even if the shotguns were illegal, which was debatable, executing prisoners for carrying them would be a war crime. The German threat revealed something important. They were desperate. The shotguns were working too well. Secretary Lansing forwarded the German protest to the War Department. The War Department asked the Judge Advocate General's office for a legal opinion. Brigadier General Samuel Ansel, the acting Judge Advocate General, prepared a detailed 5-page memorandum. The memorandum analyzed the German argument point by point and systematically demolished it. Brigadier General Samuel Tilden Ansel, the acting Judge Advocate General, prepared a detailed 5-page memorandum analyzing the German argument. Ansel's memorandum was a masterpiece of legal reasoning combined with strategic messaging. He systematically demolished the German argument while exposing German hypocrisy. Ansel began with historical precedent. Shotguns had been used in warfare for centuries. The blunderbuss, used extensively in 17th and 18th century warfare, was essentially an early shotgun that fired multiple projectiles. American forces had used shotguns in the Philippine American War from 1899 to 1902. They had used shotguns in Mexico during the Pancho Villa expedition in 1916. No nation had ever protested their use. The shotgun was an ancient and approved weapon. Its gradual disappearance from European armies was due to tactical considerations, not legal prohibitions. As warfare moved toward longer engagement ranges, shotguns became less useful, but that did not make them illegal. Ansel addressed the unnecessary suffering argument directly. Article 23, subsection E, required a comparison between the suffering caused by a weapon and the military necessity for that suffering. The key question was proportionality. A weapon was not illegal simply because it was effective at killing. Killing enemy combatants was the fundamental purpose of combat. Any weapon that achieved this purpose efficiently was legitimate unless it caused suffering disproportionate to military objectives. Ansel examined the shotgun's effects objectively. Each double-aught buckshot pellet was approximately .33 caliber. This was comparable to pistol ammunition and smaller than standard rifle bullets. The pellets were round lead balls, not designed to fragment or expand.